Hi there, today I'm going to be showing you how to connect Google Sheet with a WordPress install. Now I've done another demo where I've showed you how to connect and pull information from a Google Sheet, but today I want to show you how to update information on a Google Sheet. So I have a local WordPress install, I have a Google Sheet that I'm going to be using for this demo, and then I have VS Code open with my WordPress installation. Now, first thing that we need to do is we need to create a project so we can connect to the Google API. And the way we do that is we go to this cloud.google.com. You should see a page like this. And what you're going to do is, rather than click on the sign up button if you don't have an account, there should be a console up here. Click on that because it should hopefully bypass some items. It's going to ask you to sign up and put in a credit card information. We're just going to be using this as a demo, and hopefully you don't need the credits for the API. So once you do that, you should see a screen that looks something like this, and it might have your project called My First Project selected like so. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a project. Now you want to make sure that this project is signed in with the same account that you have for your sheet. If you have different accounts, then you're going to have an issue. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, on my project, I'm going to click on New Project, and I'm going to name this as something like Sheet Connector. Google Sheet Connector, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit create. So from here it's going to create a new project for me, and once it's done we're going to go ahead and select this project. And in this project, now what we need to do is we need to enable the API for Google Sheets. So I'm going to type in Google Sheets, and then you should see this Google Sheets API. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And from there, I'm going to go ahead and click Enable. Now in here, we need to set up some credentials. So I'm going to click on Create Credentials. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting up a service account. So service account is going to allow us to connect it to this Google Sheet. And then essentially what we're doing is we're creating a login. So on this page, I'm going to click on Create Credentials, and I'm going to click on Service Account. And then you're going to name your service account. You can name it whatever you want. For this sake, I'm going to name it as Test. This would not be great for production, but I'm going to go ahead and use that anyway. And then I'm going to click Create. And then from here, I'm going to select on the role. And the role I'm going to select is Project and then Owner. And again, this depends on what you're doing with it. For production, you might want to have Editor. But essentially Project Owner allows the individual to this account to have all access rights to this project. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and click Done. Now we've created a user, and this user we can connect to this Google Sheet. So what we need to do is we need to copy this email right here, and we're going to go into our Google Sheet that we want to have access to, and I'm going to click on this Share button. This is how you give access, and I'm going to remove this other one from a test. This is how you give access to the ability to edit this sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and click Share, and I'm going to add the one account that I added here, and I'm going to click on the Not Notify and then click Share. So now that account, this person should have access to this sheet. But we don't have a way to log in yet. So back on my cloud account, I'm going to go to Service Accounts, and I'm going to click on this email. And then from here, I'm going to create a key. So this is basically setting up a password in order for us to access. So I'm going to click on Create New Key, and I'm going to have the JSON selected, which is the recommended one. I'm going to hit Create. And this should download a private key to our computer. Now this private key you definitely won't want to have in any sort of public repo. You want to make sure that it's not checked into GitHub. you want to keep this private. And all this other information on the screen, you want to keep private as well. I'm just sort of showing you all of this because this is a tutorial. All right, so now we should have everything set up on this end that we need in order to connect to this account, but I'll leave it open anyway, just in case we need it. Now back in my Google Sheet, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some data here just as tests, so that way we can pull it. Because the next step we're going to do is we're going to be connecting to this Google Sheet and pulling it first, and then we'll push some information or put some information onto this sheet. So in my IDE, I'm going to create this as a very simple plugin. I would recommend that you do this as a plugin rather than baking it into your theme. And so the idea is let's say we wanted to create an application where anytime someone submits, let's say from contact form 7, we can put the information into the Google Sheet. Let's say first name, last name, email, and all that fun stuff. So here I have my WP content. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to go to plugins. I'm going to open that up. And in here, I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm going to call that Google Sheet Connect. You can name it whatever you want. This just makes sense to me. Now I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it Google Sheet Connect.php, like so. So from here, now we can, I'm going to zoom in. Now we can register our plugin. So I'm going to start PHP, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say in a comment, plugin name, and I'm going to name it Google Sheet Connect. And then in here, I'm going to give a description. And then I can even, if I want to, put the version number and author, like so. So I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to go back to my WordPress site, and I go into log into my dashboard. Sorry about that. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to go into plugins, and we are going to, this should be deactivated, but since I've been already testing this, I'm going to go ahead and click activate, and that's going to activate our plugin code here. So to make sure our plugin code is working, I'm going to click die, to save that, and this should turn into a white screen. All right, so we know our plugin is working now. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to be using Composer in order to install the API client for Google. Google has an API client that they recommend, a library, so we're going to be using their best practices in order to do this. So in my terminal, I'm going to go to my site, and in there I'm going to go into my public, and from there I'm going to go into my WP content, and then from there I'm going to go into my plugins, and then I'm going to finally go into my Google Connect. So I'm there. Now if you don't have Composer installed, what you'll want to do is you'll want to look up a website that is called HTTPS, and then get composer.org. And this should give you documentation on how to install it. I believe for Mac that it is curl and then ss https get composer.org/installer and then pipe PHP, and then you would hit enter. But you would want to check that to make sure. But for us, we're going to assume that you have Composer installed. If not, pause this video, install it, and come back here. Make sure that you are in your plugin directory. And then what you're going to do is you're going to type out Composer, require Google API client, and then I'm actually going to use a specific version, so I'm going to do the Carrot Up 2.0. I'm going to hit enter. So what's going to happen is Composer is going to load all the dependents for this library. So now if I ls, I should see that I have a composer lock, and then I also have this vendor file. So that's where all of my code is if you haven't used Composer before, the library. All right. So next step is while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and I'll open up a new desktop, and I'm going to be moving over manually. So in this downloads, I have this JSON, and again, this is a private key. This is basically our login information. So I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to go into my Mac, and I'm going to go to projects. This is where I'm currently saving my site, WP site. So wherever you're saving and running your WordPress install, and then I'm going to go into WP content, plugins, and Google Sheet Connector, and I'm going to paste that in there. So I'm pasting in my key, and again, this you would not want to have checked into GitHub if we were using GitHub. All right, so now we have everything that we need in order to make a connection to Google. We have our account, we have our library installed. So first thing we need to do is we need to connect to our library. So I'm going to say require, and I'm going to say __dir, so my current directory. I'm going to open up the vendor and the autoload.php. So that's basically loading this file right here. All right, so the next step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say Google account key equals __dir __ period. And then I'm going to grab that name of that sheet that I just moved over here. I'm going to paste it in there. So I'm going to grab, basically I'm grabbing this JSON file. I'm going to be using this. So next step I'm going to say is put environment Google application credentials equals account key. And I didn't concatenate with a period. There you go. So we are first setting our account key to the information in here, and then we're going to put an environment put. We're going to set the credentials to our account key. All right, next step, we're going to be now using the Google library that we loaded. And the first thing we're going to use is we're going to use client. We're going to set that equal to a new Google class of Google client. From here, we can use some methods. So we're first going to set the credentials. So I'm going to say client, and we're going to use application default credentials. Use application default credentials. Then here, we're going to add a scope. So we're going to say, what can this client do? Because again, we are grabbing this client right here, the one with the credentials. This is the one that we set up in the Google Cloud. So we're going to say add scope. And we're going to add scope to www.googleapis.com auth spreadsheets. So we're authorizing the scope of Google Spreadsheets API. Then I'm going to do a catch-all if, this might not be completely necessary, but if client is access token expired. So if our access token expired, we're going to client refresh token with assertion. So if a token is expired, our access token is expired, then we're going to refresh our token. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a service. And we're going to equal that to new. And this is the class of Google service underscore service underscore sheets. So you see that it's pulling all sorts of classes from that library, but this is the one we want to use in order to connect to Google service of sheet. And this is going to have all sorts of other subclasses and methods in order to work with this data. So now what we're going to do is we're going to set up our spreadsheet ID equals. And for this, what we're going to do is we're going to grab our spreadsheet ID, and our spreadsheet ID is actually in the URL of our sheet here. So I'm going to refresh this to make sure that I have the right URL. I'm going to grab this whole URL up here, and I'm going to paste it down below. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete everything from HTTPS to the /d, and then everything after here for the edit, I'm going to get rid of all that. So I have this string. And this string is actually my sheet ID. So this is the ID that the sheet that we want to edit. So I'm going to save that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to set our range. So range or query, whatever it is that we're looking for. So this first test, what we're going to do is we're going to try to grab something. What we're going to grab is we're going to grab from sheet 1, A1. So what we're doing is in here, we're going to this Google Sheet by this ID, and then we are getting to the sheet 1 and then exclamation point. This is essentially the same methodology you would use to grab this A1 record right here. So sheet 1 exclamation point A1. That's the range. Okay, so from here we're going to go response equals service. We're going to use a subclass of spread sheets values get. So we're going to be getting values from spreadsheet values. I'm going to be getting from the spreadsheet ID that we have set up here, and then I'm going to specifically be looking for the range. So I'm getting spreadsheet values, I'm getting them specifically, and I want from this spreadsheet here, and I want to grab this range. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to test this. I'm going to say if not empty response echo yay. So if something returns with the response, let's go ahead and print it out. The yay. So not the response yet. So I have a critical debug error. So let's see what's going on. So I'm going to go into so looking at my debug log, it looks like I made a simple error. So I'm missing something in my Google Sheet. I see exactly what it is. So in my client, actually my Google Sheet service, I'm trying to connect to my Google Sheet service here, but I didn't say who I'm trying to connect it with, and I'm trying to connect with this client right here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type in client. So now I'm connecting to this sheet with the user of this credentials here. And then now I should hopefully get a response. So let's go ahead and refresh this. And there we go, yay. Now we have my response there. So for here, what we can do is, since we have something, we can loop through this response by doing like a for each values as row and then we can do something like this. So values as row, and then I'll Silly Miles, I didn't actually set the values yet. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say values equals response, and I'm going to get the values. So our response works, but I need to get my values work first. So I'm going to say if values isn't empty, then I'm going to loop through each of my values, and I'm going to set each value as a row, and I'm going to print R on that row. So let's go ahead and refresh that, and there we go. So now you'll see that it is printing off this test. Now, why is it not grabbing the second one? Well, it's because in my range, I just said to select A1. So if I wanted to select A1 and A2, I'd have to do colon A2. So let's go ahead and refresh this page. And there you go. So it's looping through and it's printing out both of these values here. So this is how you can grab something. If I wanted to grab the whole row of A, I can say A through A. So it's grabbing both of them. And let's say I wanted to grab 2 rows. Refresh this. So it's grabbing the first row of test and A, and then it's grabbing the second row of SDF and B, just like we would expect it to. All right, so now let's go ahead and let's try to update one of these values. Let's go ahead and try to update, let's say, this B1 value here. So underneath here, underneath this practice, we're going to put a comment for updating a value, just so we can show you how to do that. So in here, what we're going to first do is we're going to set the value that we want to update, and we need to set this actually as an array. So I'm going to say values, and it's actually going to be an array, but then it's going to be an array within an array. And to kind of shorthand it, what I'll do is I'll use the brackets. So I'll say brackets and then bracket. So we know that there's an array within an array. Then I'm going to set this value to 1. So right now it is A, and I'm going to try to set this to equal 1. Then I need to actually use something called value ranges. So I'm going to say value ranges. I'm going to uppercase it because it's a class actually. New Google service sheets value range. There you go. Then I'm going to set some options. So this will all make more sense as we get done with it, but options are essentially, we have to pass an option to tell how this thing was entered. So I'm going to say the option of value input option. So how was this entered? And it was user entered. Then we are going to say value ranges, and we're going to set values of values. Okay, so basically we are presetting this. We're making it so that this value up here can be set. So the next thing we need to do is we need to actually set it. So I'm going to say service spreadsheet values update. Then we need to update. What are we updating? We are updating which sheet? Our spreadsheet ID. And we are updating a certain range. So I'm going to range equals sheet 1, and I'm going to say B2 because I want to, exclamation point B2, because I want to edit this one right here. So I'm going to say range equals range, and this range is now overriding the range up here. So if you're wondering why isn't it not updating all of them, it's because this is now overriding that because it's an equal. So then what we need to do is we need to pass in the values that we are going to be changing, and that is our values range right here. And then finally, we need to send our options. And this is all required. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and you'll notice that nothing's different. I'm going to refresh this page. Okay, but then I go back here and boom, you can see that that has changed. Now it'd be best if I set this to a response. So that way I can print R on this response. And if you had an error, you can catch that error and do something with it. So let's go ahead and show you what the response is. So it says that the row has been updated and it's successful. We don't have an error there. So if there's no error, then we do something, right? Or if there is an error, we do something. So that's how to update one item. Now let's say that we have a use case where, I'm going to change this sheet a little bit. We have email, first, last, something like that. So let's say we have an email address, a first name, and a last name. And what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to append to this, right? So first thing I want to do though is I want to comment out all of this code that we just did, because if I don't, this B1 right here, or B2 is going to be filled with that number 1, because right here, right? So this is just an example, and now we're going to show you an example of how to append a new item on the bottom of this. So let's say that we have a form, it gets submitted, and then all of a sudden we want it to add the email, first name, last name. How do we do that? Well, it's essentially the same thing, right? So we're going to say values equals, it's an array within an array, and we're going to say, let's say I'm going to put in my email, Miles S. All right, format this a little bit. Then we're going to say body equals, we're going to do the same thing, new Google service sheets value range, like so. But we're going to set it up slightly different this time, and we are going to actually be adding this in. So I'm going to put in there, I'm going to be sending in to this values, this parameter value of values, and I'm going to have that equal values. So in the body, I'm sending values, and the values is going to be this array within an array of email here, Miles S and Miles and S. So the parameters or the options, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to say options for repetitiveness, value input option, user entered. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to put this in by saying results equals, same thing, service, spreadsheet values. But this time we're going to be using the append. Then we're going to say, well, what are we going to append? We're going to append to the spreadsheet ID. So where are we going to append it? What are we going to append to? We're going to append to range, body, and then options. Okay, so then down here, I'm going to say, let's do printf. It's the number of cells appended from the results. Get updates. Get updated cells like this. All right, so let's go ahead and we will refresh this. 3 cells appended, and there you go. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say that. So what happens if I refresh this again? It should, yep, gives me an error. So this range needs to be set here. And it needs to be set to anything so let's go ahead and check this. Exclamation point. Let's go into our debug and let's see what is going on. Oh, you know what? I'm getting an error up here. Duh. It's because I took that off. So that gave me an error. So let's go ahead and set this range to same down here. Comment that out. Okay, so I reappended more cells because every time I load this page, but actually I shouldn't have to set this range, I don't believe. So let's go ahead and comment all of this stuff out. And I have to have my spreadsheet ID, of course. Okay. So in order for it to work is you have to have a cell range selected that's within the append. So that's what I was testing right there. So we wanted to make sure that I have this append here. Now you might have a question, why can't I use this set range values the same way? So let's go ahead and test it. So I'm going to comment out this body. Set range values to values. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab this right here as well. And I'm going to change this body to range values. And then we will refresh this page and a fourth time. So it's the same thing, it's just a different syntax I wanted to show you. You can either do it all in one line and use body like that, or if you'd like, you can put in the range values and then the set values as well. All right, so that's basically how you can go ahead and connect your site to being pushing information into Google Sheets. From here, what you can do is you can use all sorts of different hooks in order to hook into WordPress, and that's what we'll be going over in another tutorial on how to hook into WordPress through Contact Form 7 and submit into your Google Sheet.